Something big is happening, but no one's really talking about it. While the headlines focus on China or the Middle East, a quieter shift is unfolding right here in North America. One by one, U.S. companies are packing up and moving operations, not to Asia, but just across the border, to Mexico and to Canada. From tech to manufacturing to energy, the shift is real, strategic, and growing faster than expected. So why now? What's driving this quiet corporate exodus? And what does it mean for America's future? Let's break it down. If you care about what's really driving global power, beyond the headlines, hit that subscribe button. Welcome to Geo Capitalist, where we decode global wealth one power shift at a time. The numbers don't lie, but they haven't made the news. In the last 18 months, more U.S. companies have expanded operations into Mexico and Canada than any other time in modern trade history. From automakers and aerospace giants to tech manufacturers and clean energy developers, the redirection is quietly reshaping North America's supply chain map. According to CBRE, industrial leasing in Mexico is up over 30% year-on-year. U.S. imports from Mexico have now surpassed those from China, reaching over $475 billion in 2024. Meanwhile, Canada has become a magnet for high-tech investment, especially in EV battery production, semiconductors, and AI infrastructure. This isn't offshoring. It's something else. Economists call it nearshoring, or in diplomatic circles, friendshoring. The logic is simple. If globalization is getting riskier, bring your production closer to home, but not necessarily back into the U.S. itself. Instead, use trusted neighbors with lower costs, favorable trade deals, and more reliable infrastructure. And that's exactly what Mexico and Canada now represent. As global supply chains shift from speed to security, geography is becoming leverage. For the first time in decades, companies are rethinking what "Made in America" should actually mean and who they trust to build it with them. For decades, Mexico was seen as the lower-cost alternative to U.S. manufacturing, a country of maquiladoras and labor-intensive factories just across the southern border. But in 2025, that reputation has evolved into something far more powerful: strategic indispensability. Mexico isn't just cheaper, it's now faster, closer, and far more stable than many overseas competitors. And American companies have noticed, from Monterrey to Tijuana to Guanajuato, industrial parks are at full capacity with wait lists for new entrants. According to Cushman & Wakefield, the demand for logistics and production space in northern Mexico has surged over 50% since the start of 2023. The reasons are clear. Labor in Mexico costs a fraction of what it does in the U.S., but that's only the beginning. Skilled manufacturing talent, especially in auto parts, electronics, and aerospace, is increasingly concentrated in Mexico's key hubs. Add to that a shared time zone, shorter shipping routes, and deep trade ties through USMCA, and you get a formula that's hard to beat. Companies like Tesla, Honeywell, Intel, and Flex have expanded operations south of the border not just to save money, but to gain resilience. During the pandemic and subsequent shipping crises, many American firms discovered the hard way that relying on Asia meant waiting weeks or months for critical parts. In contrast, freight from Monterrey to Dallas takes under 48 hours. But there's another reason Mexico is winning: diplomacy. Unlike China, Mexico isn't under sanctions or tariffs. It doesn't trigger national security reviews or congressional hearings. It's part of a North American trade bloc. In an era of strategic uncertainty, that kind of political neutrality is priceless. While Mexico grabs attention for its booming factories and lower wages, Canada has quietly positioned itself as the high-tech, high-trust partner in America's economic realignment. At first glance, it might seem surprising. Labor costs are higher and there's no dramatic nearshoring narrative, but look closer, and a different pattern emerges. One built on stability, security, and strategic alignment. Under the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, Canada has locked in deep trade integration with the U.S., particularly in automotive manufacturing, energy, and advanced technology. In fact, nearly 75% of Canadian exports go directly to the U.S., and the two nations share one of the most open and coordinated borders in the world. This has made Canada the go-to destination for companies looking to manufacture high-value components, like electric vehicle batteries, semiconductor inputs, and clean energy systems, with minimal risk and maximum alignment. Take General Motors, for example. It's now building a massive EV battery plant in Quebec, part of a broader plan to onshore clean tech manufacturing while still benefiting from Canada's renewable energy capacity and government incentives. And it's not alone. Companies like Google, Pfizer, and Amazon Web Services have all expanded Canadian operations in the past 2 years, citing talent availability, policy support, and low geopolitical risk. The country's abundant hydroelectric power and ESG-friendly reputation have made it particularly attractive for data centers and AI labs, sectors that increasingly demand low carbon footprints and regulatory predictability. Where Mexico offers speed and cost, Canada offers trust and continuity. And for American firms balancing cost pressures with public scrutiny and long-term strategy, that combination is becoming more valuable than ever. Quietly, Canada has become a critical piece of the new North American industrial map, not as a rival to the U.S., but as its most aligned partner in a rapidly changing global economy. The decision to relocate operations isn't just about finding something better. It's about getting away from what's no longer working. And for many U.S. companies, that list is growing. At the top, unpredictable policy shifts, high labor costs, regulatory delays, and volatile trade tensions. While America remains a global innovation hub, it has become an increasingly difficult place to manufacture at scale. Let's start with tariffs. Under both the Trump and Biden administrations, the U.S. has imposed and reimposed billions in tariffs targeting China and other global suppliers. But those same policies have created ripple effects for American businesses relying on imported components. In 2024, companies importing critical parts faced a patchwork of duties, exemptions, and legal ambiguity, making it nearly impossible to plan supply chain costs more than 6 months out. Then there's labor. Wages have risen, which in principle is good, but they've risen faster than productivity in many sectors. That's led to a cost squeeze, especially in precision manufacturing and logistics. Meanwhile, a shortage of skilled tradespeople in fields like welding, machining, and robotics means that even well-paying U.S. factories often struggle to staff up. In contrast, companies report far shorter hiring cycles in Mexico and Canada, where vocational training programs are more closely aligned with industrial needs. Regulation is another sticking point. Environmental review processes, permitting delays, and zoning battles often delay U.S.-based construction by 12 to 24 months. Compare that to special economic zones in Mexico or federal-provincial alignment in Canada, and it's no surprise that companies are opting for speed elsewhere. In today's economic environment, time really is money. And waiting 2 years to build a plant is increasingly seen as unacceptable. But perhaps the biggest factor is supply chain fragility. After COVID, the Suez blockage, and port congestion crises, many U.S. executives made a hard pivot. Reduce exposure to global shocks, but bringing everything back home? Too expensive, too slow, too political. So instead, They chose the next best thing. Build next door, not overseas. At first, the idea sounded like a buzzword. Nearshoring. But by 2025, it's become a fundamental strategy in boardrooms across the United States. The concept is simple. Instead of offshoring production to faraway countries like China or Vietnam, companies shift operations closer to home, ideally within the same continent. But what's emerging now goes beyond geography. Nearshoring has become a geo-economic strategy, backed by hard numbers and shifting global alliances. According to KPMG, Mexico's share of U.S.-linked supply chains has grown from 27% to 36% in just 3 years. In contrast, China's share has fallen from over 35% to under 25%. In 2024 alone, more than 80% of industrial lease activity in Mexico came from U.S.-based companies. This isn't speculative interest, and it's hard investment. Auto parts, electronics, aerospace components, and now green energy systems are all moving south and north of the border. But what makes nearshoring especially powerful is that it reduces strategic risk. It shortens delivery times. It allows executives to physically visit plants and partners in a single day. It ensures compliance with USMCA rules of origin, making final goods eligible for tariff-free export. And most importantly, it builds resilience into the supply chain, an asset whose value was made painfully clear during the pandemic. Multinational firms like Whirlpool, Mattel, Flex, and Bosch have all made major commitments to nearshoring, but so have smaller manufacturers and component suppliers that the public never hears about, the quiet backbone of U.S. industrial output. These companies are drawn not just by cost, but by clarity. Mexico and Canada both offer simpler labor rules, clearer energy policies, and infrastructure designed specifically for industrial trade with the United States. Some analysts still call nearshoring a reaction, but what's becoming clear is this: it's not a detour. It's a new default, a long-term realignment of how and where America builds its future. Some of the biggest names in American business are quietly making their move, and they're not waiting for Washington's approval. Tesla now assembles components just across the Texas-Mexico border in Nuevo León. Intel has expanded its back-end production in Guadalajara. Mattel moved its entire Latin American production to a new super site in Monterrey. These aren't headlines, they're strategic decisions made quietly and often years in advance. But the real leaders of this shift aren't just the giants. They're the mid-tier manufacturers and logistics firms that form the critical arteries of U.S. commerce. These firms have realized something key. Location is leverage. Being closer to U.S. customers means fewer disruptions, lower freight costs, and more flexibility when demand shifts. What unites them all is foresight. They're not reacting to crisis. They're preparing for what's coming next. More trade volatility, more political friction, and tighter global competition. In a world where resilience trumps efficiency, these companies are hedging their future and placing their bets where predictability meets profitability. For many, that means north and south, but not home. At first glance, this corporate shift might seem like a loss. Jobs leaving, factories closing, capital flowing out. And, in some cases, that's true. But the bigger picture is more complex. The U.S. isn't being abandoned. It's being redefined. In today's economy, success isn't about doing everything in-house. It's about building regional ecosystems that create leverage, flexibility, and speed. As companies move operations to Mexico and Canada, what's left behind in the U.S. is evolving. More research and development, more design, more high-value services. This is the rise of the hourglass economy, with highly skilled innovation at the top, consumption at the bottom, and outsourced production in between. The risk, however, is in becoming too detached from physical industry. If America loses its ability to make, not just think, it could find itself dependent on others for the very technologies it invents. Nearshoring softens that blow, but it's not a cure-all. The question is no longer whether companies will leave. It's whether the U.S. can adapt fast enough to lead within this new North American industrial triangle, or be left behind by the very supply chains it once dominated. What's unfolding isn't just about business strategy, it's about power. Quietly, North America is being redrawn, not by politicians, but by companies moving with their feet, their factories, and their futures. And at the center of this new map, Mexico and Canada. Not as support acts, but as equal players in a regional realignment that most headlines still ignore. The U.S. is no longer the uncontested hub it once was. It's still essential for capital, innovation, and consumption. But it now depends more than ever on its neighbors to make things work. That's a vulnerability. But it's also an opportunity. If this shift is embraced strategically, North America could become the most resilient manufacturing bloc in the world. If ignored, the U.S. risks becoming a manager of supply chains it no longer controls. And that's the part no one wants to say out loud. If you found this breakdown insightful, watch our next video. It connects directly to what's unfolding. And don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps us track these quiet shifts in power before they show up in the headlines. Let us know in the comments. Is North America building resilience, or is the U.S. quietly losing control? Either way, the map is changing, and we'll be here, one power shift at a time. This was why are U.S. companies quietly fleeing to Mexico and Canada? No one's talking about this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.